Hey gamers, Blindy here. It's July 2025, and I just finished a game that I recently picked up, and one you've probably never heard of before. I hadn't either, but I read about this game called Fountains, developed by a small team in Saskatchewan, and I like showing some love to developers that are near me. It's cool seeing some pretty major games being developed near me, with Balatro being solo developed in Saskatchewan as well, and if you watch my videos, you'll know that Celeste has roots in Alberta, and of course Edmonton is home to BioWare, the company behind Mass Effect and Dragon Age. It's too bad there aren't developers making a big impact closer to me in southern Alberta, but maybe it's just a matter of time. But enough about all that. Today we're talking about Fountains. Developed over the course of about 5 years and using the game engine Godot, this game is a pixel art 2D Souls-like. If that concept doesn't quite work in your mind, join the club. Alright, before I get into the story, the gameplay, and all that good stuff, let's quickly discuss some of the other details first. Fountains was released on December 20th, 2024 for PC, Mac, and Linux. While it's not available on consoles just yet, it appears they're targeting a Nintendo Switch release in the future, with unknown futures for Xbox and PlayStation. But for now, Steam is your best bet. I personally found out about this game through an article from CBC, which discussed how John Pywell and his roommate dedicated around 5 years into the development of this game. Pywell wanted more from the worlds of Dark Souls, Hollow Knight, and Hyper Light Drifter, and instead of waiting, he worked on his own game to accomplish what he wanted in a new game. I love to hear stories like this. I love seeing the vision of one person becoming a reality into a quality game and something that everyone can see the quality of work that was invested into it. These solo developers and small teams are showing that the world doesn't need to live on AAA games, and that there are some amazing games from the unlikeliest of places. So, like I said, this game is on Steam for $19.49 Canadian. You won't find any amazing sales on it just yet, but I picked it up 30% off, putting it at $13.64. And this game is comically small. It's recommended that you have 1 gig of space, but my installation was 312 megs. And this was my first time playing through this game. If you're going to play this on a Steam Deck like I did, it is considered a verified title, and I agree with it. Controls were displayed correctly, the resolution and text were fine, and all that. And you could get close to 3 hours per run through, so it's fantastic for battery life. On the other hand, for some reason, this game runs in windowed mode, and adding the full screen tag to the launch parameters didn't help. So I had to manually put the game into full screen each time I launched it. If you're trying to do the same, hold the Steam button, left trigger to right click the game icon on the taskbar, then cursor over and right trigger to left click on full screen. You get used to it, but you shouldn't have to. As for approval ratings, Fountains has a really small sample size. Metacritic doesn't even show any scores, and Steam was at 89% approval with 227 reviews submitted. Similarly, ESRB doesn't have a rating, but I would claim it's maybe T for teen, with the only consideration being mild violence. And How Long to Beat didn't have any times for main runs, but it showed 11 hours for main and extra. And at this point, I'm going to laugh a little bit. Most of the hours played for reviews submitted on Steam showed that players put in around 15 to 20-ish hours, give or take. But not me. Maybe I completely suck at the game, which I won't deny, or others were able to figure out stuff that I didn't to make fighting easier, or something. But I submitted my time as 36 hours. And I believe at the time of this recording that is the only time submitted, because that's what shows up in a Google search for how long to beat this game. It sucks too, because I didn't think I was terrible at this game, but maybe I'm just not great with Souls-likes. But we'll get into those details in just a little bit. At this point, I'll be heading into info about the story, controls, gameplay, and all that. If you're sensitive about spoilers, I will do my best not to get into too much info that could spoil things for you. with the exception of the General Cruz fight, which I will use as an example. But everything else, I'll try to avoid ruining anything for you guys. That said, what I may think of as just info may be a spoiler for you, so this is your warning. Potential spoilers are ahead. You play the role as a person. Well, that's not super helpful. You start off as a prisoner, and a couple of guards toss you into a well. It's expected that those that get tossed in there will die, or if they survive, they won't last very long. But you're different. You've got some spunk, some moxie, or, at the very least, the will to live. So you find a sword, and you fight back against the monstrosities that inhabit this world. And as you adventure forth, you learn a bit about this place. Like any good adventure game, everything is out to kill you. You get a bit of a story about the usurper, how the power of water has caused the people of the world to be consumed by power, and how you'll be the one to change the course of the fountain's power. It's a nice little setup, but the story doesn't drive this game much at all. It serves as a backdrop, and it's for the gameplay that people will want to play this game. Now, it looks like this game calls itself a Souls-like as its primary genre, and initially, I thought that wasn't quite right. I would have placed it as a 2D adventure game, or maybe even a Metroidvania game, but it didn't take me too long to understand how it got the Souls-like tag. I'm not really a big fan of Souls-likes, or Souls for that matter, but every previous one I had played was a 3D game, so this was sort of bucking the trend, which was an appealing thought. How in the world could it be as hard, or even harder, than the 3D games that I had played before? But now, I would easily say that yeah, this game should be classified as a Souls-like. It does approach things slightly differently, which I'll get into later, but it has a few of the main concepts such as invincible dodges, significant pattern recognition, enemies that hit really hard, a stamina meter, and so on. It even has messages on the ground from other players, using a set sequence of words like you'd see in other Souls-like games. One good thing about this game is that it has a map. You can even place icons on it as well. The one bad thing about the map, though, is that it generally really sucks. It is in really low resolution form, which, given the pixel graphics nature of this game, makes sense, but I think it was scaled down too much to be very effective. But it was the only thing that you had, so your alternative was to memorize everything. I originally thought about the map in this game being similar to The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, but in reality it's closer to Minecraft's maps in that the resolution feels similar, though the map is way more useful than a Minecraft map is. Now let's talk a bit more about what it's like playing this game. The visuals are pretty cool. It's in a throwback pixel graph style with a very muted palette. It's kinda cool, and it reminds me a bit of, again, A Link to the Past in its world design. It's not a great comparison, and maybe there are other games that are more accurate to compare to. The only other game I could think of that comes close to comparison would be Faxanadu for the NES, for those few of you that may be familiar with that one. If you can think of a game Fountains looks more like, please let me know. Because Fountains has a more flat color design, it can suffer from a lack of visual clarity between the areas that can be traveled, enemies, or with things that can be interacted with. It doesn't happen a ton, but it can be a bit confusing at times. It also felt like, because of the limited colors used, detail and things like the trees were kind of left out, and I don't want to say it was a lazy design choice, but there was an opportunity to make them look a bit better. As I played through this game, I couldn't help but feel that my enjoyment of it was kind of split into three parts. First, the very beginning of the game was fun, but it was challenging. Your character was really weak to start, so even minimal creatures can be deadly, at least until you figure out how your character moves, how strong your attacks are, the way the enemies attack, and all those little details that you haven't quite learned yet. This part was a bit frustrating, but you hold some optimism knowing that you just have to get the timings down and perhaps an upgrade or two, and then you'll be much more comfortable playing the game. The second stage was the middle of the game, where your character has some of those upgrades. Your weapon is a bit better, your armor keeps you alive a bit longer, your health and stamina bars are much more forgiving, and you figured out how to defeat all the overworld enemies without much trouble, but the bosses still give you trouble. This stage is really quite fun, since you're able to explore the world much easier, but things are still a bit challenging, and you have to be careful not to overwhelm yourself. But you can feel free to check out all the little places that held you back before. The last stage is the boss rush. You've done what you need to in the overworld, you've explored just about everything you need to explore, and all that's left is clearing the bosses. This stage is no fun at all. You run to a boss location, you fight, you die, and you run back. If you lived long enough in the boss fight, maybe you learned a little bit about its attack patterns, and if you didn't, then you just wasted a few minutes of your life. I was surprised at how frustrated I was getting at this stage, and in reality, it's probably because I'm not great at these type of games, but I knew what I needed to do to kill these bosses, but I just couldn't play smoothly enough for long enough to kill these bosses quickly. At least, the combat felt generally good. You roll around and dodge like a regular Souls-like game, and you swing your sword around as you'd expect. You also have some spells that you can use. Which brings us to water, which is kind of the main premise of this game. Water is essentially a magic source, which allows you to do a few things. Primarily, it's the easiest way to replenish some of your health, but it also powers up certain abilities you gain from accessories that you wear. And you can gain water from two main sources. One is by buying some at a fountain, but the easiest way to gain water is by a physical attack on an enemy. If you hit an enemy, your water amount will increase, so if you're taking damage, the best strategy is to attack to gain enough water to heal yourself. Now, back to those spells I was talking about. If you equip an item that allows you to attack, it'll eat into your water, making the risk and reward a balancing act of attacking versus healing. Personally, I rarely use spells in fights because I usually needed to make sure I could heal, and I never found those attacks to be strong enough to consider switching from swinging my sword. Of course, as you advance further and further into the game, you'll gain access to newer swords, but I found that they didn't feel game-changingly different. Sure, they were a bit better, and cumulatively over time, they're probably noticeably different than when you started. But I never felt like I had a power spike at any time, which usually had me debating if it was worth switching weapons at all. I'm sure in the end, it was definitely worth it though. One thing I would have liked to have seen was getting away from the genre's trope of making you run a long distance just to get back to a major fight after you die. You spawn at the last fountain you visit, but the only fountain that was close to the boss fight was the final one. All the others had you trekking to get back, and even if you don't encounter anything along the way, you're still taking a walk. Just let me get back to the fight. But like I said earlier, the combat in this game still, for the most part, feels pretty good. It's not perfect though, particularly with the boss fights, which I'll discuss later. Oh, and one last quirk of the combat system. You have a stamina meter, and it'll get reduced by swinging your sword, dodging, and sprinting. All things you might expect, but sprinting behaves strangely. If you sprint for a long distance, the stamina meter will deplete and make you walk, as you'd expect. But if you continue to hold the sprint button, you'll start sprinting again, and your stamina meter won't move. I suspect it's a bug, since it's really inconsistent as how it handles that. But effectively, you have an infinite sprint after the stamina meter drops. One thing that I really enjoyed about this game was the world design. There were lots of places to explore and hidden areas that don't show up on the map. It feels a little overwhelming when you're in the middle of exploration mode, but once you've visited most of the world, there's a lot of other places worth checking out. Just note that you won't really be able to explore much in the world until you defeat one of the overworld enemies that block your path. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but what I mean is there are some stronger, non-boss enemies that will need to be defeated, so expect them to return once you die or visit a fountain. But after you beat one of them, then there's a lot more to explore. And as you progress and gain new abilities, new areas will open up to you, kind of like a Metroidvania or other adventure-style game. And if you look closely, some walls are illusory, so you'll be able to find the occasional hidden area by smacking a wall. Now, while some of your abilities will let you find new areas, you can also get stuck that way. For example, you can access new areas with the dash ability. But using your dash takes water, so if you run out of water to dash to an isolated area, well, you're kinda screwed. At least in your pause menu, there is an option to return to the last fountain. Fountains in this game are very similar to bonfires in Souls games. You can activate one to heal and save. While you don't have the option to teleport, you do have the option to buy water, which I never did. It seemed like a waste of coins. Either I could survive easily, or I would die repeatedly. Neither of those options benefited from maxing out my water supply, so I wasn't spending the coin for that. Keep in mind that when you die, you will lose half your coins. There's no picking up what you dropped or any other way of retrieving lost funds. You die, you're set back a bit. There is one way to avoid that, and that's to buy a coin purse at a vendor that sells them. They hold a limited number of them, but essentially you're buying items that could be sold back at full price. It helps a bit, but I don't recall ever selling any. I think I bought a whole bunch and just had them in my inventory for the entire game. But there are a few vendors in this world, and they work mostly as you'd expect. They sell some things, mostly useless, and they buy things, for when you're tired of digging through all the items in your inventory. And items were a lot like buying water for me. I never used them. They might have helped a little, but I was usually getting wrecked by bosses, so using an item never helped me enough. And then I'd just be using them for no significant reason. Maybe I should have tried a bit harder to see how much benefit I could have gotten, but most boss fights seem like an issue of precision rather than a small advantage an item would give. This game implements, let's call it a live pause. I'm not sure if there's an actual term for it, so there probably is, and I just don't know it. But when you hit the pause button, it's actually just an inventory screen with the world still active around you. So if you're getting smacked around by an enemy and the pizza man rings your doorbell, well, you've got a choice to make. And while the pause menu, in air quotes, is mostly functional, I found that the status icons were kind of confusing for things like attack, physical defense, etc. And knowing how much better or worse an item was to equip was frustrating. I was constantly swapping items to see which numbers would change. And for those of you that love a good minigame, Fountains has fishing. I don't like any fishing minigame, but this one is mildly alright. They seem to be in just about every adventure game, so I guess it's just par for the course. And a few other quick thoughts before I cover one last big topic. There is an area where a couple of enemies are fighting each other, which I thought was pretty cool. It's nice to know that they're not always looking to kill you. These two want to kill each other, then after that, they'll try to kill you. Scattered throughout the world are life fragments, which you can use to, well, as you'd expect, increase your life bar. Occasionally, you'll see a dog out in the world. Be sure to pet them. And the music was generally pretty good. Nothing amazing, and nothing stands out to me or makes me hum when I'm done playing, but I think the music was quite effective throughout the game. But these bosses, they changed the experience from being a challenging, interesting exploration of a low-res game to hours of sheer frustration. And while I could use several fights to explain how annoyed I got, I'm going to use the General Cruz fight in particular to convey my thoughts on the bosses in general. If you're wanting to avoid spoilers, you can skip the next few minutes as I go into further detail. Just look for the death counter to go away, and we'll be past the discussion of this fight. So, like I said, there's a death counter. Enjoy watching the many times I died to General Cruz. Go ahead and guess how many times I died. It's way more than I expected. So, to start, it took me around 3 hours to finally kill General Cruz. Not that he was exceptionally hard, but there were some issues I had with this fight. When you're learning patterns from enemies, it's extremely important to be able to see how an attack will begin so that you know when and how to avoid the attack. And the attacks can't come at you at such a pace that your stamina is unable to keep up. If you're literally dodging the instant your previous dodge finished, you're going to end up taking some damage since you'll be out of stamina. And the fight shouldn't have anything that you can't avoid. All attacks should have some way to avoid the damage, as well as have enough of a window to not require frame-perfect timing. And the attacks need to look distinct enough to be able to easily decipher what is coming. If the attacks look too similar to each other, you're going to mistime a lot of attacks. So I've kind of laid out some of the issues I've had with this particular fight. Some attacks felt poorly telegraphed. Sometimes it felt like all you could do is dodge constantly without any break, so that when you run out of stamina, you take a hit, which will always destroy your available health. And you better time your dodges perfectly, because some of the general's attacks have strange windows into how you can dodge, and even when you dodge, the attack may still be going and hit you on the backside of the swing. And some of the attacks look just like other attacks, but they pause and start a little bit later. The dodge that would have been perfect for the short version of the attack puts you in terrible position for the attacks that start later. And any distance that you would have from the general is pretty negligible, since he has punches that can travel the entire distance of the arena. So if you think you're far enough to avoid damage for a second that you can heal, you're probably about to get punched. And let's keep going. Several of his punches even switch his sides in the middle of its animation, meaning if you dodge the punch to his right by going to his left, it'll switch sides mid-swing and hit you on the left. Not only that, but as his punch is in its animation, he's sliding across the ground toward you, meaning you can't even make him miss by dodging away from him. And that's not to mention his lightning attack. Its visual cues do not line up with its damage. Visually, it looks like it'll hit you immediately, so I would dodge once I see this animation wind up, only to find out that I landed at the very edge of its huge radius and still get hit. It took me quite a while to realize that I had to wait for the animation to continue until the damage portion of the attack was in effect. I was getting really annoyed with trying to heal as well. Because you're constantly being barraged with attacks, you can't find a safe distance against him. Healing felt very punishing. If you took the time to heal, you were going to get hit. Eventually, I was able to find some small bits of time where I could sneak in a quick heal, but for the most part, healing ended up costing me health. Now, I don't want to give the impression that this boss fight was unfair. I want to give the impression that all the boss fights were unfair. Some more than others for sure, but there's a fine line being a tough fight and being an unfair fight. But sure, maybe it's just me. Maybe I just need to get good. I knew the patterns for these bosses. I knew what I needed to do to get past these fights. I just needed to do it. But I think that's the problem. I think that if I know what needs to happen, and I figured out the patterns, I know the timing, I understand what will happen when, then a boss fight should not destroy me like these fights did to me. It shouldn't take me over 200 tries if I know what to do. Now, most other fights were much shorter, probably around 30 to 100 deaths. But is it just me for thinking that's still really high? Maybe I'm just not cut out for games like these. And as I think about it, maybe I also have some frustration because the boss's difficulty levels feel way out of balance with the rest of the game. At times I felt like I was in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, particularly the scene where they're running through the wedding party, slashing and killing everything in sight. Here it felt like at the end of the game, I could easily run around and kill whatever I wanted without much difficulty. Even the more challenging overworld enemies from early in the game would go down without much of a fight. Then I would take on a boss and I would get instantly crushed, and continuously crushed, and my enthusiasm for the game also got crushed. I was enjoying being able to feel competent against all these other enemies, but I just couldn't transition smoothly into competing against the hardest enemies in the game. And that's a wrap for this review. Now, after all that, you might be asking if this would be a game that I would recommend. And I would say that I would only recommend this game if you really enjoy Souls-likes. That's about it. I would not recommend this game if you're looking for a retro-inspired game. I wouldn't recommend this game if you enjoy 2D adventure games. I would not recommend this game if you like Metroidvania-style exploration. I would not recommend this game if you like NES tough games. I would only recommend this game if you enjoy Souls-likes. At 36 hours, I was one of the slowest people to run this game, and many people are able to play it much quicker than I would. But I think that people that are well suited for this kind of game would do well, while more casual gamers would have a really tough time with it. But if you want to challenge yourself, then this one is worth checking out. And is this game replayable? Once you know where everything is, It'll be replayable for speedrunning purposes, but there won't be much to gain unless you missed some hidden areas or something like that. So for the most part, no, it's not replayable. To score this game, I will give it a 9 out of 15. 60%. Just above the halfway point. It's got a lot of good things, but I struggled with continuing to enjoy it. It started off decently, then it progressed to becoming a really fun game. Then it just sapped my energy at the end to the point that I was just looking forward to ending my time with the game. I'm pretty sure that I spent just about as much time fighting bosses than I did the rest of the game, and I think that doesn't hit the right proportion for me. Before I go, let me show you a glimpse of the final boss fight. So, what are your thoughts? Was I fair? Was I wrong? Let me hear it in the comment section. For channels that have a ton of subscribers, you'd probably see something about Patreon at this time, but I don't have a Patreon page. So if you want to connect with me, you can visit my Discord channel. Really, Discord is the best form of social media nowadays, so let's chat there. And speaking of subscribers, as you can see, I'm just a tiny channel. But if you liked this video, a like on the video would mean a whole lot. And if you loved this video, check out some of my other reviews. Or, better yet, subscribe and be one of the earliest followers of this channel. Thank you to each and every one of you that took some time to watch this video. Without you, I'm just a weirdo talking into a microphone. I hope to see you all in a future video. Take care and have a wonderful day.